Okay guys, although you should be doing your absolute best to stick to the meal plans and the foods that have been provided on your meal plan, we understand that 8 weeks is a very long time. That is the reason why we've decided to provide you with a substitutions guide, so that if you feel the need to do so, if you need to implement some variety, you're able to make appropriate substitutions with appropriate food selections in the appropriate amount. You'll notice when you're looking at your substitutions guide that foods are grouped into different categories such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. When making a substitution, there are two things that you need to keep in mind. Number one, you should focus on making substitutions within a given category. For instance, if you're looking for a protein substitution, you should be selecting another protein option. If you're making a carbohydrate substitution, you should be selecting another carbohydrate. That makes sense. Number two, total calorie content is much more important than specific macronutrient content, meaning the total amount of calories that you're substituting is the focus you should be having, as opposed to trying to perfectly substitute specific amounts of protein or carbohydrates or fats. So the point is, when you're making substitutions, focus on making calorie substitutions. Replace calories with calories. That should be the main focus. If you do that, you will remain in perfectly good shape. Now, utilizing this resource, the substitutions guide, does require just a little bit of knowledge in terms of how to convert macronutrient content, meaning grams of protein, carbs, or fats, into calories. It's pretty simple, but we'll make sure that we go through an example together so that if and when you choose to use this guide, you know how to do it. One other thing to keep in mind is when you're making a substitution, you might be looking for fats, proteins, carbohydrates. You might be expecting there to be a content or a value listed for every one of those foods under each of those categories. If you notice that there is not a macronutrient listed for a specific food choice, meaning there is no value for carbohydrates or there is no value for fat, that means that the amount that's contained is either none or negligible enough that we don't have to take it into consideration. That's why it is not listed. So just focus on the things that are listed. Now, with all of that being said, let's go through an example together to make sure that you guys understand how to utilize this guide should you choose to do so. Because again, we want you to have the tools in place and the ability to make the appropriate substitutions in the appropriate amounts. So let's go through an example together. That way you guys can get off and running on your own. So, when it comes to grams of protein, grams of carbohydrates, grams of fat, and converting them into calories, there's only a couple pieces of information you need to know. First is that for every gram of protein, there are 4 calories. For every gram of carbohydrates, there are also 4 calories. For every gram of fat, there are 9 calories. There's an example listed there at the middle of the page. Let's say that you're looking to substitute a food that, when you refer to your substitutions guide, has 21 grams of protein, 6 grams of carbs, and 5 grams of fat. First thing we have to do is convert that into calories. Now, what you would do is you would take 21 grams of protein and multiply that by 4 because, as I mentioned, there are 4 calories for every gram of protein. That's going to give you 84 calories. You're going to take 6 grams of carbohydrates. You're also going to multiply that by 4 because, again, as I mentioned, there are 4 calories for every gram of carbohydrate. 6 times 4 gives you 24. And then you're going to take 5 grams for the 5 grams of fat and multiply that by 9 because, once more, as I mentioned, for every gram of fat, there is a 9 calorie value. Once you've got those 3 things figured out, 21 times 4 is 84, 6 times 4 is 24, 5 times 9 is 45. You're just going to add those 3 values up. 84 plus 24 plus 45 equals 153 calories for that specific food item in that amount. But here's the one thing I want you to keep in mind. We do allow there to be a plus or minus 5 calorie difference in a food substitution. Just remember that if at any point you're trying to make a substitution and you're a little bit confused, this example on page 2 under nutritional information is very straightforward, very simple, very easy to follow. I want to urge you all to utilize this guide if you feel it to be necessary, but one more time I'll say this, you should really be doing your very best for the 8 weeks to stick as closely to your prescribed meal plan as possible, because that is the meal plan that we truly believe is going to make the biggest difference for you in achieving your goals, guys. So with that, enjoy.